Morning, 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 you little lot. How are you? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. Apologies for my absence the last couple of days. There wasn't a hell of a lot to talk about in the Tottenham world, and so I didn't want to bore you with overuse of my face and vocal cords being shown and heard on camera. I hope you're all happy and healthy nonetheless. And I'm back today. It's Saturday. It's a cold Saturday morning. I'm back today with the transfer news, views and clues exclusive from Football Insider and Peter O'Rourke, Tottenham focused Football Insider journalist Peter O'Rourke. It's an interesting one. It is. Before we get into it, guys, please do me a favour, smash the like button for me on the video like you always do. You know how much it helps the channel grow and find new Tottenham fans. Hit the subscribe if you haven't already, and even if you have hit the subscribe button, as I've asked for the last few videos, can you check again to make sure you're not unsubscribed? YouTube are up to all sorts. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topic. Let's get into it. It is all about Kalvin Phillips. According to Peter O'Rourke, Tottenham have reprioritised their transfer targets. According to their sources, Tottenham have added Kalvin Phillips to the very highest echelons on the list, on the short list, but face massive, quote, massive competition for the English player. He's a player we've spoken about quite a few times on this channel. A player that I'm a fan of, or at least I am a massive fan of the player he was at Leeds. I think he very much suits Ange Ball in the six. His ability to kind of cover ground, work well with the inverted fullbacks, tackle hard, be a little bit of a kind of terrier or a pit bull, chasing players down. He's good with his first touch, he's good in close control, and he's got a wonderful ability to find players with long balls into the channel. That was the Leeds United version of him. In terms of the Manchester City version of him, not really sure. We just haven't seen really anything like a large enough sample size to know what's going on there. According to reports, he's put on a little bit of weight, which never is a good sign. And look, I'd love to know why he's being kept out of the team. Is it just because Rico Lewis has been so exceptionally good that he's just outshone Kalvin Phillips? Is it that Pep doesn't think he fits the system? Is it that he's, you know, fame and money and all that stuff has gone to his head, that level up wasn't right for him? Was he better off being a bigger fish in a smaller pond? You know, I'm not sure. I don't know. And that reality is going to kind of cloud my ability to give you a firm decision here. But ultimately the story comes off the back of Bentancur's injury. He's out until probably March. The fact that we're already without James Maddison for an extended period of time, and the fact that Pape Sarr and Bissouma are going away for at least 3 games in January for their international duties, and of course that Pape Sarr himself is also out with a hamstring, and we don't know the extent of it yet. We haven't really had that much insight. All we know is he didn't play against Villa and he won't play tomorrow. Other than that, we don't really know. And hamstrings can be, you know, short-term or long-term, but usually reoccur. And so you have a situation here now where, on paper, in terms of midfielders, for most of January, we're only going to be, and into February, we're only going to be having options regarding Højbjerg, Lo Celso, and Ollie Skip as recognised sort of traditional midfield three. We are without the first 11 midfield three of Maddison, Sarr and Bissouma, and obviously the first backup, the guy that we assumed was going to come in and be able to take over during that period, Bentancur. So it's pretty bleak. What I think we'll find will happen, of course, tomorrow, like with Villa, Decky will be shoehorned into the 10, which for me isn't a shoehorn anyway. It's more of Cinderella's slipper. I think it's the perfect fit for him. You know, I think we've, by hook or by crook, out of adversity comes opportunity. I think we've maybe found and discovered Decky's best position. He's so strong, he has more room in the 10 rather than being kept up, you know, on the sidelines, such as the tactics when we have the ball in the Ange Ball system up against the, you know, up against the right wing, the right touch line. I think it's better for him in the 10. He's good in close control. He has more options to be able to use his left foot and shoot the ball either towards the left side or to the right post now, which is an additional option. He's very good with his finishing, and I think it works. I really do think it works. So it's not the end of the world that the situation has afforded us a glimpse into what Decky's long-term suitability could be. He obviously played there, you know, he's played in that role for his international side and for Juve, so we know he can do it, and we've seen it now for Tottenham. But in the immediate future, according to Peter O'Rourke, having 4 of your top 4 midfielders out leaves us with a crisis of how to spend your budget. We don't have that much budget. We know we need a striker. Many argue, myself included, we need a forward, a winger as well. We obviously need a centre-back. Some would argue 2. I think a replacement goalkeeper is necessary, but probably not until the summer. And now you have to look at, well, what do we do in the midfield? Do you go with what you've got? And that's presuming, of course, as Ange said, that we don't lose any more players, guys. You know, at the moment, I think we've lost 13 first-team players at some point this season, and we've only played 13 games. You know, that's an injury per game ratio. It's madness. We've still got 7 games, I think, until the January window opens. So if the ratio continues, you know, Chirpy will be playing in midfield. It's not good. But let's presume it does stay as it is and we get lucky, which has been something that hasn't visited us too frequently this last couple of months. Then, according to Peter O'Rourke, we're looking at Kalvin Phillips. Now, to me, as I say, Kalvin Phillips is a player that I used to love. I do think the old version of himself will fit the system. But, you know, Manchester City spent 60 million quid, I think, on him, and they'll want to recuperate some of that. There's going to be the English tax. I understand people like Dave, Irish Hotspur, who say, look, if he wasn't English, if he was French or Swedish or Ghanaian, no one would talk of him in the same light as they do. But they do because he's English. And it's an interesting point. I do think there's some truth to it. However, he is English, and I think that Tottenham need to consider English homegrown players. And the theme of this video is about kind of zooming out a little bit here, because I think we could be tempted in January as fans to put pressure on to spend whatever budget there is, 60, 70 million quid, I don't know, on 5 or 6 players, because that's how many holes we need to cover. But in so doing, you're spreading yourself too thin. You're going to be buying subpar players that, again, are going to leave us with legacy issues when we don't need them in the future or don't want them. And we spent the last 4 years trying to get rid of players that we've misspent and didn't do enough research on, and we're still finding that problem now. And so for me, I think you have to zoom out, shake hands with reality about what this season has become. It's going to be a struggle to get into Europe of any kind, I think, now. But I'm still optimistic. I still think that we've got to keep our eye on the bigger prize, which is this is the start of a 4-year project, and I think you don't go and spread yourself thin in this budget. I think with this window, I think you buy, if you've only got a little bit of money, you make sure that it goes on a permanent signing of 1 or 2 players that you know are players that you've identified as solving a problem, ones that can help over the next 3 or 4 years, and that ones you're not going to regret signing in an ideal world. Obviously, you can't rule out mistakes, and I think that should look like a striker, if possible, like a Santiago Jimenez, and a centre-back. I know that doing business in January is not easy, but there's an opportunity that Tottenham, the football club, needs to consider, which is that most of our competition are up against FFP bandwidth issues. And so it means that there'll be strikers, the few strikers that are available, Tottenham could steal a march and get one of those players in, whilst the teams that are competing for that signature are left having to sell players before they can afford new players, or will have to get owners to pump money in. As I say, if Tottenham drop the £50 million in, and then on top of that spend whatever money is left in the Harry Kane window, from the Harry Kane money, then you can go and get a Santiago Jimenez or an Ivan Toney or whoever you want. And if you get it done quick and don't haggle all window, you get the deal organised as quickly as possible before Arsenal have to sell the 2 players to be able to afford the money, before Chelsea have to sell 3 or 4 players before they can afford to bring more players in. Then it ultimately affords you that kind of that glimpse into an uncompetitive market for a highly in-demand player. And so I think that Tottenham should only focus on the players that are really going to add value in the January window. And anybody else that you might want to bring in that is covering a gap but you're not sure about. And Kalvin Phillips, for me, is someone that is covering a gap and is someone that I'm not sure about, because I don't know why he has fallen off so much, why he's put on weight, what's going on there. You don't commit to a 4-year contract with a player that you're not sure about. You know, you go and get him on loan if possible. Now, unfortunately, according to Peter O'Rourke's article, there's going to be massive competition for his signature from Newcastle, from teams overseas, Juventus, etc. And so, let's talk about that. Well, Newcastle United are trying to replace Tonali. In my world, I think they're going to go and get Ruben Neves. Why wouldn't they? The rule was just passed that allows clubs that have the same multi-club ownership structure to loan to within each other. And obviously the owners of Newcastle also own the team that Ruben Neves plays for. And so if the buyer and the seller are essentially the same entity, then there's no reason why Newcastle can't just get him on a season-long loan. It won't affect their FFP, rather than having to pay or negotiate or compete for Kalvin Phillips. So I think you could rule Newcastle out of the conversation. I think they're going to go and get Neves. If they would prefer to have Kalvin Phillips because of homegrown rules, then I don't see why Tottenham don't go and get Ruben Neves, if possible, and we'll figure out our own homegrown issues in the future. And I forgot to mention a minute ago when I was talking about homegrown, I do think it's important that Tottenham keep an eye on the bigger prize again, zoom out. Tottenham are trying to get rid of deadwood players, but one of the issues with that is that two of them, at least two of them in my opinion, maybe three, of the deadwood that we don't really need, are homegrown. Ryan Sessegnon, Ben Davies and Ollie Skipp. If we're really trying to improve and go on, then those guys probably aren't the level. But they're hanging around because of the homegrown quota. And so, is that the reason why Kalvin Phillips is high on the priority list? Because it makes it for an easier conversation around what to do with Ryan Sessegnon or Ollie Skipp in January or in the summer. Food for thought. So if Newcastle are off the list, then according to Peter O'Rourke's article, most of the other teams that are interested in Kalvin Phillips are Italian, but Italian clubs don't really have the same amount of money, and also they're not going to want to pay the English tax because they're not benefiting from a homegrown English player. It doesn't work like that. So I think you could rule them out. And so arguably, I think that there is a march possible for Kalvin Phillips. And as I say, if you can find the version of him that played for Leeds, then I think you've got a really good player there. But I don't want Tottenham to buy him. I want Tottenham to loan him because there's too many unknowns. I want Tottenham to spend this summer's money, this January's money, that is there to be spent on players that you know you've done your due diligence on, you know that are going to be part of the plan for 4 years, and that don't just paper over a short-term crack because of an international break or an injury crisis, but ultimately paper over or fill in a massive indentation, a massive pothole in the squad because we haven't replaced one of the world's best strikers in Harry Kane. So for me, going and getting a Santiago Jimenez and then a centre-back that is appropriate, adequate, left-sided, left-footed, that can do the job now in Van der Ven's absence, but also is a very adequate backup for our full-strength 11. And again, there'll be a video coming out that talks about the 13 different centre-backs we're currently linked with in that regard shortly this week. But I think that's where you spend your money. And then we'll have conversations around if Højbjerg really wants to leave, or is that going to be, you know, curtailed because of the injury crisis going forward. When that, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I'd say exactly the same thing about Kalvin Phillips as I'm going to say it about Jota as well. Don't know what version of Jota there is. We've seen Jota at Celtic, unbelievable at times, absolutely unbelievable. But is he of the level to do it in the Premier League? Well, he went to Saudi Arabia and he barely gets a look in. Hasn't really played. So again, what version of Jota are we getting? Too many unknowns to go and drop money on him, full-term, permanent money. And I think that's the same reason why we've read articles saying that Ange Postecoglou, whilst he's very familiar with Jota, is unsure about whether he's the right guy for this particular role. Not so much about his ability, but it's his readiness, his his updated presence, real time. Is he right at the moment? Again, the only way you'll find out without kind of leaving yourself in a potentially disastrous situation for the next 3 or 4 years is if you get a loan deal. So I expect and I encourage lots of loan deals this window if possible. And over to Daniel Levy and to Ange and to Langer, McKenzie and et al. To figure it out. But for Kalvin Phillips, like I say, I'm a big fan of the old version of him. Don't know what version of him we're currently looking at. And I'd be surprised if Pep Guardiola would want to work with Tottenham anyway because of his disdain for Daniel Levy, going back to the Harry Kane dramas. But if there was a deal to be done, I really don't think it's right to do it on a permanent level just yet, because you know I just don't want Tottenham fans, I don't want the club to miss the wood for the trees. I don't want them to spread ourselves too thin, commit to too many players that we're not sure about in the short term because of the crisis we currently face, knowing full well that this is only stage 1 of a multi-stage 4-year project, hopefully longer project. And you know, we've got to keep our eyes on the bigger prize, which is finding the right solutions for the long term, not for the short term. Let me know your thoughts, guys. I'll see you later on for a pre-match live stream this evening or this afternoon at some point. But have a wonderful day, keep warm, and I'll see you later. Like, subscribe and comment, and as always, bye bye.